Hey guys, welcome back to Aspect of the Day. I opened this Astrologer's Handbook, very nifty tool, this morning to Mars opposite Uranus. I wanted to give myself a little bit of time before reading the description and giving my own interpretation of it. It's a longer description and it deserves a bit more finesse because it's not a very finesse inducing aspect, as you'll find. Nevertheless, here we are. Bookmarked it. Oppositions of Mars are always fun, always carry a lot of energy with them. Remember, an opposition is a feeling of tug of war between two planets, especially before they're integrated, before they find their own roles. Essentially, the philosophical issue with an opposition is dualism. Your perception between those two planets involved creates a dualistic way of thought, a this or that, black or white, us or them, you or me, love or hate kind of perspective between those two planets. So I'm going to read through this description, and unlike usual, I'll probably stop here and there to explain certain things, and by the time I reach the end, maybe I'll have given the full description. We'll see. Mars opposition Uranus. The natives with this opposition are inclined to explosive outbursts of energy which can be manifested in quarrels. Ill temper and irritability are common. These people are averse to any kind of routine or discipline. Their efforts are spasmodic. However, when they do work, they can overexert themselves. Lack of moderation is the main vice of this opposition. I think I've said on this channel before, I've certainly said in my more philosophical videos on my other channel, my main channel, I've talked about moderation being a virtue. Okay. And naturally, we do have a tendency to lack moderation before we're integrated in the themes of any opposition. But when Mars is involved, because Mars is so action-oriented, it wants to do the Mars thing. And Uranus is maybe kind of sitting in the background, informing Mars of its ideas, but not giving full moral justification for the actions that Mars seeks to take. There's also danger of violent death because of the double Scorpio connotation, which stems from the rulership of Mars, co-ruled by Scorpio, and the exaltation of Uranus in Scorpio, which I place secondary importance on outer planet exaltations, rulerships, dignities in general, but it's neither here nor there. In war situations, this aspect, when activated by transits of progressions, can indicate violence from others or from the natives to others. Anywhere where there's a lack of moderation, there is a lack of control over the object that you should be moderating or that you're participating in, or the activity that you're doing, whatever it is. A lack of moderation leads to that activity being the ruler of you, right? Owning you, controlling you. I always say, like, I have great sympathy for addicts. I have many people who are close to me in my life who are addicts. And what I've observed is that even the addicts who are fully sober, they have to take that extreme measure of being fully sober in order to have control over themselves. And essentially, the root of that is that the substance is still controlling them because it's heavily informing how it is they engage with that thing. And that is to not engage with it at all. There's a higher spiritual level that you can get to regardless of what your temperament is or what your inclinations are, and that is the level of letting go. Truly being able to let go of all things as a spiritual practice. That doesn't mean to disregard things, but if you can let go of the thing, then you can participate in it because you can moderate it. Does that make sense? So that's fundamentally what's lacking in this aspect. It's a very difficult thing to deal with. Stubbornness and the desire for personal freedom at all costs make these natives hard to deal with. They cannot be instructed or led against their will. Lessons have to be learned through hard experience, right? Because they're action-oriented. They just have to do what it is they're going to do, hyper-independent. You can't tell them otherwise. They've got to get it wrong to learn their lessons. And even then, they might be so stubborn, they keep repeating the same mistakes. Youths with this aspect may be reckless and engage in revolutionary activities, especially when other factors in the horoscope confirm it, right? And Uranus is kind of that hind mind that's taking in information and manipulating it and using it to justify Mars's impulsive action. So we do see this in activists, revolutionary activists. Not saying they all have this aspect, okay? Like I said in a video yesterday, just because you don't have this aspect, it doesn't mean you can't embody the qualities of this aspect in some way from some other part of your chart or part of your underdeveloped soul. Moral integrity. This is why higher values are so important, right? When you have a difficult aspect like this, I have some hard aspects to my Mars in my birth chart. I have squares, but it's at the apex of a multiple T-square, and because it's at the apex, Mars is actually kind of in a good place because it's kind of playing the referee between those other opposite planets across from it, but that's different issue because it's squares rather than oppositions, but still a hard aspect to Mars is a hard aspect to Mars. And if you don't have something in the chart inherently balancing that aspect out, then it's even more important for your moral values to be cultivated, to be strengthened, to live by good principle, that you can be the authority over, right? There's no greater sense of authority. Like Mars seeks to be independent because it's like our primal masculine side of us, you know? It wants to act, it wants to do things, wants to rage, wants to speed, it wants to fuck, wants to kill. Excuse me. The natives' aspirations lead them into dangerous and unstable situations. They can make enemies out of friends through ill-considered actions. I was going to say accusations for some reason. It can also be accusatory. They're difficult to get along with because they want their own way under all circumstances. So there's like this primal selfishness. There can be sudden drastic changes in their lives. Yeah, because they're so impulsive, they create chaotic circumstances around them. So life changes before their eyes. Abruptly, because they're changing from moment to moment and acting out of selfishness based on desire. Their desire, okay, we're talking about desire now. Their desire is to sweep away the status quo without adequate planning for where to go or what to do next. Classic political activism. That's all it is. This unpredictable conduct exacerbates those who must contend with it. Right. It makes being someone in this person's life very difficult. The natives tend to confuse their desires with their will. Yes, there is danger through electricity and machinery with this aspect. Can't emphasize enough the importance between... I'll come back to this and think about it more in a bit. Can't emphasize enough the importance between desire and will. Desire is a natural instinct that we all have. It's about what we want. When it's a Venus thing, it takes the form of Venusian desire, right? We want comfort, we want touch, we want romance, we want connection with others. Softer Venus things. When it comes to Mars, it has more to do with aggression, war, destroying, killing, tearing down. Having no regard for what went into building this thing. There's no thought behind impulsive desire. So if you're a slave to your desires, you're actually not living and acting consciously. You don't really have free will. And that's the difference between desire and will. Desire is just this instinct about what you want, whether or not it makes sense and whether or not it's actually good for you. It's about want. It's a vice, essentially. It's something we all experience, but we have to channel it in a mature way. Will is that thing that we have to cultivate. It's our decision-making power, aimed toward what's good for us and for all. All right. But because Uranus is on the other side of the chart, kind of pulling at Mars and pushing and giving this like tug and pull energy, giving Mars tidbits of information, might be esoteric in nature, might be very unconventional. Uranus is unconventional, right? Your Uranus in your chart, that, by the way, the house that your Uranus is in your birth chart represents the area of life where you do things in a very unconventional fashion. So you're doing day-to-day practical things that everyone does all the time, whether it's like their work or like how they interact with people or whatever the themes of that house represents. They take a very unconventional approach. There's quirkiness there. So with this opposition, regardless of the house, whatever it is that Mars is trying to do, wants, is going after, Uranus is like giving Mars all this justification that Mars can just run with. Yeah, I will go burn down this building. I can see arson being a very common theme with this aspect, or at least the desire to set things on fire. Mars is fiery on its own. All right. So what are the positives of this aspect? Well, it's the same as the positives of any extreme personality trait. It seems like the big five trait that aligns most closely with this aspect is agreeableness, but particularly a lack of agreeableness. So someone who has Mars opposite Uranus is almost certainly very low in trait agreeableness, which means that they're more likely to break the law, they're more likely to be combative and pick fights with people, to disagree. So the good thing about this is that because there are good traits to every personality proclivity, can't say there's not. We need people of all types so that the world can function the way it needs to. One thing that this native doesn't have a problem with is saying no. That can be a skill that one can monetize, for better or for worse. It's a skill that people can use to, clean up organizations and, take action when it's needed to resort. Let's put an end to this system that isn't working, right? They can be the catalyst for that. But what is grounding that judgment, that initial judgment that this is wrong or this is bad or this isn't working? Is that judgment accurate? That's where spiritual maturity really comes in. Emotional maturity, compassion, the ability to connect, to understand that your point of view is not always correct. All right, so there's a sense of humility that this aspect requires in order for it to produce positive things in the world, rather than just be super destructive and lead the native into an early grave. And I talk a lot about those spiritual and philosophical values on this channel and my other channel, Overthought and Understated. So you're always welcome to have a gander at that other content. So I feel like this is kind of just an extreme, difficult aspect that makes all of that other philosophical content that much more important. So go have a look at some of that and have a good day. Cheers.